Welcome to this Constructing Excellence CPD event. I'm going to hand you over to Michael in a second. There's just a couple of things that we've got coming up. So we've got a networking breakfast on the 26th of March, and we've also got a webinar by Donald Insall Associates. That's on the 20th of April. If you've got any questions or anything during the CPD event, put it in the chat or the Q&A and we'll come to it at the end. Over to you, Michael.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, my name's Mike Williams. I work for a company called Icb Waterproofing. What I'll do now is I'll share my screen with you so you can see my CPD. If you have any questions, like I said, please put it into the chat box. I believe my colleague Carl is somewhere on the call as well. Her email address will be in the chat box. So if you have a request for a CPT certificate, if any of you are architects or surveyors and so forth, then we'd be happy to issue you guys with that at the end. But if you just give me a second, I'll turn myself off and then I will share my screen with you. So if you give us a second, guys, I just got to figure this out. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to do it this way. Right. There we go, guys. Right. Let's just move that out of the way. Right. So yes, thank you very much for coming today. My name is Mike Williams. Like I said, I work for a company called Icb Waterproofing. We're based down in Poole, but we work nationally. Obviously, maybe if you can probably tell by my accent, I'm based actually in South Wales, but I work and cover the Oxford area as well as the rest of the Southwest. Icb Waterproofing, we've been going for about 35 years, and we're primarily dealing with flat roofing and elements such as that, although we have a whole host of other sort of products and services that we provide. But this particular CPD today is going to kind of guide you through what we do and how we approach waterproofing. We're going to look at a few of the most common types of products that are on the market. I know Emma was saying there's quite a few of you in from Kingley, obviously as construction and designers and so forth. It's quite important to understand the pros and cons of various different types of systems. So the main idea behind Icb has always been to offer superior quality solutions. Our managing director, Rob Jackson, who owns the company, it's his ethos that we provide our clients and architects and surveyors, etc., construction companies, a professional service full of technical service and backup. We as a company are obviously into the sustainability element. We try and ensure that we are environmentally as friendly as possible. We aim, and again, to ensure that we are, well, for example, we are a carbon neutral company, or we offset some of our sort of carbon and emissions through various schemes that we are involved with. But first of all, Icb Waterproofing, who are we? Like I said, we are one of the UK's leading providers of waterproofing solutions. We are specialising in flat roofing, but offer most systems to meet that of the building application. So we're not just talking about the flat roofs, we're talking about balconies, basements, walls, floors, internal areas. There's a whole sort of gamut of products and services that we get involved in. We have a network of over 500 approved roofing contractors across the UK. I myself in the Southwest have probably got around about 100 contractors that I work with, all of various sizes, from very, very small individual guys through to multinational companies. We have a separate company within Icb. So there are 3 companies within the Icb group. We have Icb Waterproofing, we have Icb Fabrications, which is our metal manufacturing company. They are primarily dealing with aluminium and powder coating materials. So cappings, fascias, soffits, etc. Like I said, but that is a separate company within the three companies within ICB. The third company is Icb Projects. Now, Icb Projects is our contracting arm. Basically, we are involved in installing things such as roof safety, green roofing, solar PV. There's a whole host of things. Basically, it's the elements of the flat roof that the roofing contractors don't particularly want to get involved in. Roofers are really interested in just going in, doing the waterproofing, and then going on to the next project. They're not interested in installing solar or installing line safety systems or barrier systems on roofs. That is where our contracting company, Icb Projects, gets involved. Like I said, we've got over 35 years of experience within the construction industry. ICB has been going since 1984. We have various amount of products, over 1,000 products available for sale. And we have nationwide coverage. I'm one of 7 guys that cover the UK. So we've got guys in Scotland, in the north, in the Midlands, in the south. I'm the southwest, and we actually have a dedicated person covering the Bournemouth and Southampton area, because we've got such a massive amount of work in that area. We've got one individual covering that as well. So what do we offer? From a waterproofing side, we offer pretty much everything that you can get involved in within flat roofing. So we do single plies, we do liquid systems, and we do reinforced bitumen systems. Within the liquid systems, there are different types such as Pmma, polyurethane, Hotmelt systems. Within the single plies, we have various different types of single plies, and I'll run through them very shortly. And within the felts, we got a different types of felts as well. But we pretty much cover the majority of flat roofing products. From a point of view of design, or from the point of view of warranties, etc., we're able to provide the end user, whether that be the roofing contractor or the main contractor, everything from the deck upwards. So we can provide insulation, we can provide the vapor barriers, we can provide tapered insulation, and we provide in all the other products, ancillaries such as walkway tiles, rainwater outlets, adhesives, paving support. So when I'm doing my designs, and when I'm sitting there with an architect or a surveyor looking at a project, we can look at the whole roof, and we've got a product for all of the scenarios that you provide, that you'll find on a roof. One of the things ICB sort of prides itself on is the full technical support that we're able to offer. So we have BIM drawings, thermal calculations with regards to condensation risk analysis. That is something which I get asked for a lot. With all the complications of thermal values within buildings these days, it's very difficult sometimes, because the thermal values are getting higher, the thickness of the insulation is getting higher, but your clients in your buildings, they want high ceilings. So all of a sudden, all that insulation has got to go somewhere. It's got to go on top of a roof. Then that starts to interfere with things such as doors and windows and thresholds, etc. So we get involved in a lot of this to make sure that the condensation and the thermal values are correct. Wind uplift calculus, drainage, solar PV. You can say there's a whole sort of range of different calculations we do. We do all this through myself and our in-house technical team. With regards to some of the on-site things that we do, we get involved in site inspections and roof condition reports. So one of the things I do quite a lot of will actually be, for example, with surveyors or with refurbishment projects, is go in, look at a project that's there and figure out what needs to be done, whether it's to strip it off or whether it's to overlay, have the correct solution, and then do the calculations and the specifications, etc., but then be able to follow it through all the way until the end with the roofing contractor. One of the things that we also do as well, and we've been doing for a couple of years now, is the condition improvement funds. So for any of you guys who are involved in that element, whether it be surveyors or whether it be, pricing and doing this type of work, we've been involved in it for several years, and we work with a network of chartered surveyors across the UK, allowing us to do that, as well as working closely with our roofing contractors, who are typically the guys who are going to be installing. So that's kind of sort of an overview of the full technical support that we do. One of the things I get asked all the time is, what warranties do you offer? What can you do? We can offer up to a 25-year guarantee, normally as standard, depending upon the types of materials and the build-ups, etc. We can go to the life expectancy of the building using a Hotmelt system, for example, because that's more of a structural waterproofing than a sort of waterproofing over the top of insulation. We have various insurance elements. We have various different sort of abilities within the warranties, but basically we can cover everything that we've been supplied by ourselves to the end user. So realistically, it becomes an ICB system guarantee, and it's a single point guarantee. So if there's any issues with any of the products, it's being dealt with by us, not by 6 or 7 different manufacturers. So this is the section where we're going to talk about sort of 3 main elements. We're going to talk about single ply, we're going to talk about bitumen, and we're going to talk about liquids. Obviously, within each of those sections, there are different products, and each product has its place. Each product has its cost point, and each product has its pros and cons, depending upon what the end user or yourselves as designers are looking for. So within the single ply section, we've got PVCP, EPDM, FPOs, EPDM, PPs, and VETs. Now, they're all long technical words, but basically they're all the kind of standard membranes you're going to find here in the UK. We as a company have 3 of those. One is the PVC at the top. We have an EPDM PP, and we have a VET, and I'll explain to you the pros and cons of different systems. So the first one, which is the PVC, that's probably the most common type of single ply that you're going to find on the market. Again, it's been around in the UK for 40 odd years. When we first started in 1984, I think there were 2 or 3 different manufacturers in the UK, and we became the 3rd or the 4th. It's cost effective, it's fast, and it's a clean installation. There are no flames involved with PVC membranes, but some of the downsides to PVCPs is they're a different quality of standards, and some of them have the plasticizer in there, which is a potential harmful product. Some of the other issues that you get with the product is you've got plasticizer loss. Now, plasticizer loss is caused by contact with non-compatible materials, things such as bitumen, or you're talking about mosses, or you're talking about plant life. You have evaporation of the plasticizers over time. So a product may start in its lifespan as a 2 mil piece of membrane, but over time it may work through till around about, well, sort of 1.2 or even thinner. Consumption by organisms, like I mentioned earlier about mosses and algae and growth. And to be honest, most PVCPs don't like long exposure in rainwater. So you'll have problems with plasticizer migration, especially within gutters. So you can see that little image on the right-hand side there. That's one of the surveys that we did where we've gone to look at a roof, and the roof itself is started to crack. Now, there are different qualities of a PVCP, and not all of them are the same. Most of them will have a lifespan of around about 25 years or more. But if they're not installed in the correct way, then they have a habit of ending up getting damaged like that there. But one of the reasons why they're very popular is because they're cheap. EPDMs, now this is the kind of stuff that we see a lot of in the residential market. We very rarely see EPDMs being used on large scale. There are a few manufacturers out there that do it, but EPDMs tend to be your more domestic products. So you'll find them on your sheds and on your small extensions. Positives with an EPDM, it doesn't contain plasticizers. It is environmentally friendly because it's a rubber system. But the problems you get with EPDMs is they are really difficult to lap seal, because you're not what you classify as homogeneously welding, whereby you're heating the membrane and melting it together. You're using and sticking it down with a bit of glue. So if you can see that one at the bottom there, that was a pipe or something that's come through the roof. That's just been stuck down with lots of different types of patches. My opinion is EPDM is okay on a small build, but when you've got detailing, posts, pipes, upstands, etc., stuff like that, where there's complicated detailing, then EPDMs, in my opinion, are just not fit for purpose. There is an American, quite a few different American products that have come over to the UK. They're called FPOs and TPOs. Now, they're flexible or polyolefins. Positives, they're tough and they're durable. They're bitumen compatible, unlike the PVCs and unlike a lot of the Epdms. They are UV stable, but the problem being is they're not really tried and tested. There's no long-term data for them over here in the UK. They've only been around for a while. They can be difficult to install because they're quite rigid. They're very thick. I'm sorry, not thick. They're very, there's no flexibility in them. So things such as pipes and detailing, again, can be very difficult. And to be honest, because they're being shipped across from the US and they're not readily available here in the UK, they are tend to be on the more expensive side of the products. You can see there on with the two images where the membrane has shrunk, and you've got that. You can see the reinforcement, and it's started to crack. So these are the sort of products that we use. The image you can see on the right hand side there, I did that with one of my roofing contractors in Newbury. That's the Stonehenge Visitor Centre. Did that probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and that was all our Everlastic product, which is our Epdm. Now, I mentioned about Epdms earlier on. What makes our Epdm slightly different is the fact that we add the PP, which is the polypropylene compound. So it makes it a lot more workable. It makes it a lot longer lasting. We can homogeneously weld the laps rather than just sticking it down with a bit of glue. But it has the ability, and the reason it was specified for this particular job is because the English Heritage insisted on having a product that was free from halogens and chlorines, free from PVC and plasticizers. It's a good resistant solar radiation membrane. It's, again, resistant to various different chemicals and pollutants in the environment. It's a root resistant barrier as well. So we can use it for green roofing, although they didn't use green roofing on this. It makes it fully bitumen compatible, unlike the original Epdms, which typically have to be kept away from bitumen. And obviously it can be recycled. The only negative from our point of view is that it is a little bit more difficult to work with than, for example, the next product that we're going to talk about. So the product that we've been involved in and been selling here in the UK for the last 35 years is Avalon. It's a product called Alwitra, which is a German product. The product we use is Avalon V or VSK. It's either a self-adhesive or a glued version. Great mechanical properties, again, resistant to solar radiation and all the chemical pollution in the environment. Is completely free from plasticizers, so there is no degradation, there is no movement, there is no alteration within the actual compound of the product. It is what it is. It's 1.2 mil thick, and it stays 1.2 mil thick. It's completely and fully bitumen compatible, so we use it a lot when it comes to refurbishment, but again, we do use it for new build. It has all of the relevant fire accreditations, because again, they're becoming more and more important with everything that's gone on with Grenfell. We have a range of colors, and again, it can be recycled. I suppose the only negative that we can think of is it is on the more expensive side than some of the cheaper PVCPs. But saying that, typically when we're working with main contractors, we still will do large scale projects. It just depends upon the complexity of or what the client is looking for. When it comes to single plies, because we're going to go on to liquids next, when it comes to single plies, they are by far probably the cheapest of the three ranges of products on the market. So for the guys out there who are within the construction industry, who are not so much specifying, but estimating projects, you will normally find if you've got a roof that's up out of the way, there's very little traffic, there's very little requirement to go on the roof, a single ply is absolutely perfect. Like I said, they range from anywhere from £6 to £7 a square meter all the way up to sort of just under £20. Normally, obviously the higher you get, normally the quality of the product is a lot better. Sometimes it may come down to the thickness of the product that you're using, but within single plies, they are very, very popular. But with single plies, it's a single layer. So if you don't get it right, you can puncture it, and you can end up obviously with having leaks into the building. So it's very important to get the single ply into a scenario where it's not really going to be damaged within the construction phase, because I've been going on construction sites myself for over a decade doing this stuff. And some of the practices that I see on site when it comes to, it's flat, we can load materials on there, we can have screws, we can have slate being cut, it all comes down to how well the roof is looked after when within the construction phase. Moving on to liquids. Liquids, again, are more and more popular, but I will say there's two types of roofing that we use liquids, or two types of scenarios where we use liquids. Your first one, which is your GRP, I would say that's probably used more in the domestic market. That's what you'll see in your little garages and your little dormer extensions being done in. Some of the positives, as with most liquids, is they forms a seamless system, whereas obviously with single plies you're going to have joints. Typically it's a fast clean installation and there's a wide range of colors, but with GRP the problem is normally down to the fragility of the product and the fact that it is completely dependent upon the weather, and it's also completely dependent upon the installation, because you are building this from scratch. If you don't have the right substrate, you don't have the right primer, you install it on a slightly damp or wet deck, it will completely knacker the solution. So GRP for me is the one product that I see on a regular basis being used where it goes wrong, because GRP tends to be a product that you can pick up from any builder's merchants. You can go into B&Q and buy it. You don't have to be a trained roofer normally to install GRP. So typically this is what I would see on the more domestic side. I would not see this on a large scale project, for example, because it's too fragile. It doesn't like movement and they end up cracking and splitting. And it's not very good in an environment where you're going to have a, close to the sea, or for example, because it just can't handle the harsh environments. Polyurea, that is a product that, to be honest, it's a very good product. It's a very, very hard wearing system. It again forms a seamless membrane. Again, it's fast. This particular image you can see on the right hand side is the new coverings that are being put down in Wimbledon. One of our roofing contractors is using. He's not using a product. We don't sell polyurea, but he's using a product which is a liquid system. But it basically comes out of a spray gun, and it usually is activated with some kind of salt water. And as you spray it, it cures very, very, very quickly. But it is probably one of the most expensive liquids out there, and again, it's totally dependent upon the weather's conditions. But it is a very, very hard wearing system, and in my opinion, a very good system. We also get involved in Hotmelt. Now, from the construction side, I know a lot of main contractors are moving more towards this system. This is a monolithic system whereby you have the traditional bitumen with additives in there, such as rubber and various different compounds. It basically makes a seamless system on the roof, because again, it's a liquid, it's all bonded together. It's usually done on an inverted roof, whereby you have your insulation above the waterproofing. It's typically obviously a structural waterproofing as well, so it's going to be going straight down onto the deck. So if you're doing a big reinforced concrete deck system, then this is typically the kind of system that a lot of main contractors will like. We do this, like I said, but some of the negatives of using this particular type of system is it still is classified as hot works, because you've got a bitumen pot with bitumen melting in it at 180 degrees. And the operatives, if they get that on their arms or their legs, it's going to burn. It's a very messy application. As you can see there from the image, there's a lot of black bitumen lying around, and they've got various different layers. It has to be used in an inverted application. So you end up with the waterproofing on the deck, and then you end up with your insulation, whether it be EPS or XPS above. But then you've normally got to ballast that roof, whether it be paving slabs or chip-ins. So it's really only suitable for the larger scale reinforced concrete buildings. You wouldn't necessarily find this being used in a refurbishment job, or you wouldn't find this probably being used on a job where you've got a timber frame building. But saying that, it is a seamless membrane. It has healing properties, whereby small holes, small pin pricks that would possibly let water in with a liquid or a normal single ply would self-heal. Normally when I do my CPDs and I go out and about, I take a little pot of this bitumen with me and I poke a pen in it, and when you take it out, by the time we finish the CPD, the hole that was there has come back and it's sealed itself. But like I said, it's a solution really we only find on the larger scale new builds. But again, very, very good system. And this system can come up to sort of 40 or even a life of the building warranty, because it is part of the structure. So the two types of systems that we do more of are polyurethanes and PMMAs. Polyurethanes, they're more of a Mediterranean product. We use a product which we get from Greece. Positives of polyurethanes, they form seamless membranes, again, like the GRP and the Hotmelt. It has a higher level of elasticity and it has no plasticizers in it. High resistance to stagnating water, UV resistance. It can be used to waterproof pedestrian decks. Typically, when I do liquids, I'm using them in a scenario where it's either complicated to do detailing, so you don't want to use single ply or you don't want to use bitumen. You want to use a liquid system because it's easy to go around the detailing. Or you're typically using it in a scenario whereby you got a lot of foot traffic or a lot of high pedestrian use. A single ply or again a bitumen system in those scenarios, you need to put paving slabs or decking or some form of covering over it. Whereas with a decent liquid system, you can add anti-slip into it and it becomes a much higher wearing system. But polyurethanes and PMMAs, they're on the top end of the scale of cost. So typically you wouldn't necessarily be doing this on several thousands of square meters. This would be on your balconies, on your walkways, etc. But we will do it on a large scale, but it depends upon the client's requests. Some of the negatives is slow curing in the polyurethane. It uses the environment to dry, whereas a couple of the other systems, they are dried with catalysts, solvent based, so it does have a smell. So we do have a non-solvent version, but that's even slower to dry because it uses the atmosphere and the water in the atmosphere to dry, and it's a very messy solution as well. It's quite easy to get wrong. It's really important with liquid systems, the preparation is done correctly. The substrate needs to be dry, it needs to be clean, it needs the cracks and the holes in the substrate need to be filled in. There's a whole host of things that can go wrong even before the liquid is actually put down on the deck. Probably the most popular system that we do as a company is a PMMA. Okay, Pmma is a polymethyl methacrylate, long word, but basically it's a resin system. And what they do with the resin system is a two-part system. So you have the resin in one pot and you have a catalyst. The catalyst is basically hydrogen peroxide. And what you do is you add the two together. And when you add the two together, it creates an exothermic reaction within the pot and it starts to dry the liquid. On average, within 30 minutes of it being mixed, it is dry. So it's brilliant for the UK environment, especially when, you know, the weather turns or the weather's coming in. If you've got a polyurethane system, for example, or even a hot melt system, it takes time to dry. It's using the environment to dry. So when the weather's nice and warm, it's brilliant. But when the weather is cold or there's a lot of humidity in the build or in the air, polyurethanes and hot melts and stuff like that, they can take a long time to dry. This stuff, it will dry in anything up to minus 15 degrees. So if it's freezing out, then it will still dry. On a cold day, you mix your pot, put your hand on the pot, and you've got a lovely warm hand warmer. But this particular product, again, has all the benefits of normal liquid systems, forms a seamless membrane, it's hard wearing, it's fast curing, it's a very durable product. It's completely cold application, so there are no flames involved, as is with the single plies. It is easy to install in congested areas. So again, we use this on complicated detailing. But again, it's messy, it's susceptible to temperature changes, and the PMMA is the most expensive product that we do. It can be anything up to £100 a square meter, depending upon the buildup that you're looking for. But typically, we're using this on areas where you're going to have a lot of high footfall. You can see here, this is, I don't actually know what it is. Actually, it's one of my colleagues' images. So you can see on the top, the original was a felt system over the roof. And we've layered this with the various different layers of the system. And then we've got a fully trafficable area with anti-slip in it. And now there is no risk of damage to the waterproofing. So PMMA, in my opinion, is the best out of all of those systems. But when it comes to large scale projects, hot melt in an inverted roof scenario is also a very good solution. Lastly, onto the more traditional sort of bitumen systems. Bitumen systems probably sit in the middle when it comes to cost. So again, for you, any of you estimators out there, your bitumen systems on average are going to be anywhere sort of from 10 to £30 a square meter. On the higher end, it's usually a thicker, more higher grade product with a longer lifespan. on the thinner side, it tends to be more what you're going to see on your garages and your domestic side. But there are typically sort of three different types of bitumen systems. First of all is the SBS. Like I said, the real difference between these products is the softness or the ease of use. An SBS is quite a soft product. It's really good in colder conditions. So if it's cold, you're not having to put as much heat into it. So, you know, some of the positives is improved resistance to aging and weathering. Most felts these days have composite reinforcements, so they will handle movement a lot better than they traditionally used to do. But some of the negatives obviously is still that they have to be torched on in most scenarios. So you are then, increasing the risk of fire within the build. Although we do have full self-adhesive system option, whereby every layer is self-adhesive and there is no flame, but the process is a much slower process to that of installing it via a torch. An APP, that tends to be better when it comes to, well, it says low temperatures there, but I would say it's higher temperatures. It's a harder product, so you need to put a little bit more heat into it. So when the weather's hot, it doesn't melt or it doesn't get damaged as much. Again, totally resistant to heat and UV. We can put green roofs over this. We can use it inverted. We can use it in a warm roof, cold roof. You know, there is lots of different scenarios. We tend to use our reinforced bitumen membranes quite a lot for our condition improvement fund for our schools. I don't know what it is about the schools, but they still love to have their felt. But again, you know, it still needs to be torched on. The rolls are only 8 meters long, so you're going to have lots of joints and so forth. And again, felts are a little bit more difficult when it comes to detailing than maybe, say, for example, a single ply or definitely a liquid system. What you find more and more these days, and this is probably the one that we sell the most and specify the most, is the hybrid systems, whereby we take the benefit of the soft SBS on the underside, so you don't need a lot of heat. So that means you can reduce the amount of gas that you're using and run the risk of flame. And then we put a harder wearing system on the top, such as a TPO, which we mentioned earlier on in the single plies, or the APP. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to torch your nice new cap sheet down, and as the guys are walking on it, leaving footprints everywhere. So the hybrid solution tends to be hard wearing, good at low and high temperatures, good resistance to fluctuations, and again has got the composite reinforcement in there. So if you look at item number 5 on that, which is the white one in between the dark and the beige, that is a polyester reinforcement, and basically it's it composites, so it gives it allows movement in the products much better than they used to. But again, you know, they still need to be torched on in most scenarios, although our full self-adhesive system is becoming very popular, especially in scenarios where you're limited, you can't use a torch. You use a heat gun, so you're using the same heat gun that you use in single ply, but there is no naked flame coming out. It's just heat that's coming out. It's like a big hairdryer. So that is what we do when it comes to our sort of membranes. So we've kind of looked at bitumens, liquids, and single plies. Like I said, single plies are the most common and most cost effective. The liquid systems, we tend to use them more in the hard wearing, balconies, areas where you might have a lot of plants, but we also use it for walkways and balconies where you're going to have a lot of pedestrian traffic, because they are very hard wearing, but they are ultimately the most expensive product. And then you've got your bitumens, which kind of sit in between. They do the larger projects, but they also will be able to be trafficked a little bit more than maybe a single ply, for example. But you have the issue still of flame at the moment. Quickly on to something that we do quite a lot of, which is the condition improvement funding. So we basically work with surveyors and we work with schools. We go out to the schools and we go out and survey their properties. Like in 2017 and 2018, there was over £466 million worth of work awarded to over 1,000 academies and sixth form colleges in England. This is only applying to England, it doesn't apply to Wales or Scotland. And like I said, the success rate was around about 38% for all applicants. We have a success rate in excess of 80%. But there is an increase in demand for refurbishments, especially within the flat roof, although the SIF is also for boilers, security, electric. There's a whole host of different elements, but we're predominantly obviously involved in the roofing. So what we do and how we work within the SIF is we cooperate with a network of various surveyors, and we conduct roof condition reports. So we go out there and typically we're coring the roof out, as my colleague Mark is doing over there. We then use that information to then produce a specification based off what we find. We then obviously go and deal with the bid with the surveyor, because obviously the chartered surveyors are who are putting the bids together. But obviously there are other elements within the bid that we may not got involved in, windows and doors, etc. So we're able to assist on the flat roofing side. And then from there, then we help through the installation, inspection, and guarantee it at the end. So through those 3 steps, by the time the school are finished, they're ending up with a fully watertight, fully inspected, and fully guaranteed system through Icb waterproofing. This is just one example of one of my projects that I did 2 years ago. This is Churston Academy down in just outside of Brixham, down in Torquay. This is the state of the roof when I surveyed it in the summer the previous year. It was quite an old roof. There was a lot of chippings, there was a lot of debris, a lot of sort of growing elements on there, and it was leaking. So what we did was we undertook the core sample. In this instance, it was a wood wall slab deck and it wasn't that wet. So what we did is we were able to obviously repair that, and then obviously put the report together, and then obviously that went off to be funded. Obviously we were successful with the funding. What we were able to do then is the roofing contractor was then appointed by the surveyor, based on maybe some of our recommendations. We obviously put them forward, and they obviously bid within the cost structure that was there. So they scabbled the roof off to get rid of all the chip-ins, because we don't want the chip-ins on the roof. They were then able to produce a plain bitumen and use the bitumen coating that was already there, and then we were able to install insulation and bring the roof up to the current thermal value. It was then used a felt system of ours, our Strata Pro M, which we showed earlier on. So this is the hybrid system. And in the end, we were able to completely finish the roof and obviously give them another roof that's going to be there for at least another 25, 30 years. So that is sort of that when it comes to sort of the CPD. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Oh, look, actually. I just put you there, Emma.
I am, yeah. There's a couple of questions. Want me to read them out to you?
Yes, please. Yeah, if you've got them, that'd be lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a couple of questions from Mark. So he wants to know what the cost per square meter range for the reinforced bituminous membrane system you described.
So the one I described, that's typically in and around about just under £20 a square meter for a full system. So that's your vapor controller, your underlay, and your cap sheet. Obviously, insulation. I don't even want to quote costs of insulation because they seem to be going up every couple of weeks. But when I talk about the systems that we provide, yeah, you're looking around about £20 a square meter.
Okay, and sorry. The next question is about the cost per square meter for the single ply and the liquid applied systems.
Right. So we will go, right, typical single plies will go from as cheap as like £6 or £7 a square meter all the way up to around about £20 on the top end. And it all comes down to how they're fixed. On the cheaper side, they tend to be mechanically fixed. On the more expensive side, they tend to be fully adhered. My preference is always to specify a fully adhered system, mainly because you're not reliant upon fixings in certain places. Now, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I specified up the BAMC, which is the British Airways maintenance crew section in Cardiff Airport. Now, I went on that roof and it was 25,000 square meters big. But when I stood at the one end, you could see the roof breathe because you see the ripples of the membrane as the wind whips over. With a fully adhered system, you don't get that. It is stuck solid to the deck. So my preference is always that, although in some circumstances, mechanically fixed tends to be quicker because you're not having to wait for glues to go off, but it tends to be more expensive for the fully adhered than it is for the mechanically fixed.
Okay.
That answers the question.
And then lastly, from Andrew Hill, what are the warranty periods for the roof types?
Typically for single plies, they tend to be normally around about 20 years. They can go from 10, 15, but on average, normal warranties for single plies are 20 years. When we're talking about the felt systems, they tend to be slightly longer at 25, because normally we're putting in a much bigger, thicker system. When it comes to the liquid systems, again, on average, I'd say 25 years. Like I mentioned earlier on with the Hotmelt can be, in theory, the length of the building life. So it could be 60, 70 years. But on average, they normally will give a 40-year guarantee on the Hotmelt system because it's part of the structure. Single plies, we can do 25 years, but if I'm honest, typically it's 20 as standard.
Perfect, thank you. If anyone's got any more questions, pop them in. A recording, as Stuart has said, will be available on YouTube in about 48 hours. It takes a little while to get on there, so if you want to rewatch any of this, then go ahead. If you want a CPD certificate, then the email address for that is carla@icb.uk.com. So give her an email. And I think, oh, hang on, we've got one more question, I think. Oh no, it's just a thank you.
That's okay.
And so, yeah, so thank you from everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.